Former President Barack Obama was in Berlin several days ago and spoke at an Obama Foundation town hall. During a portion of this event, Obama spoke about compromise and concerns that he had about progressives in the United States of America.
One of the challenges that I had when I was a young organizer was I wanted change now, and I wanted 100% of what I wanted. And then I'd suddenly confront some politician and they'd be like, well, we can't do this and we can only do that, and maybe we can get a little bit of this done, or I've got to take into account this constituency that feels very differently about the issue. And I'd be furious and frustrated. And then I was elected to office, and some young organizer would come into my office and say, I want you to do this. And I'd say, well, I can give you a little bit of this, but so I've been on both sides of the equation. And one of the things I do worry about sometimes among progressives in the United States, maybe it's true here as well, is a certain kind of rigidity where we say, I'm sorry, this is how it's going to be, and then we start sometimes creating what's called a circular firing squad, where you start shooting at your allies because one of them is straying from purity on the issues. And when that happens, typically the overall effort and movement weakens. So I think whether you are speaking as a citizen or as a political leader or as an organizer, whether you're in the nonprofit space and civic space or you're in the political arena, you have to recognize that the way we've structured democracy requires you to take into account people who don't agree with you. And that, by definition, means you're not going to get 100% of what you want. But you should take some time to think in your own mind and continually refine and reflect, what are my core principles? Because the danger is if you don't know what your principles are, that's when you compromise your principles away.
Compromise does not have to be a dirty word. We've heard that before. I think I remember Hillary Clinton saying that. I don't like that type of language. I'll just say that there's some legitimacy to it, but the only way that it does, or it's not going to be a dirty word, is if the people that you are compromising with are coming from a place where they're being genuine. Like they're actually engaged in an honest conversation. There's not anything like behind them pulling their strings. There's not any corporate interest or anything like that. So yes, compromise does not have to be a dirty word, but in 2019, as we see as the case with our political situation, yeah, oftentimes it is. I can't take him seriously. I can't take former President Obama seriously when he speaks like this, because he says, he's talking about the rigidity. You can't be like that. You can't be so rigid in your movements and your arguments, because that would weaken a movement. That's his words, not mine. We can't just, he said, create a circular firing squad and shoot at our own allies, that are trying to get something done, get progress done. The GOP, the Republican Party of 2019, and going back to his administration, we talked about on the show in 2016 how the Republicans were engaged in just like elite level types of obstructionism. That was a real thing, and it has not slowed down coming into 2019. The Republican Party has moved right, and they have not stopped going rightwards. They do not seem to feel the need to come to the center, to come left at all. No, they feel the need to stay right where they are. So imagine Obama, who was described as a progressive. Imagine him saying to progressives, hey, you can't be so rigid in your process, okay? You got to really, come on, you got to give and you got to take and you got to be engaged in this compromise. No, we don't. Because when we do that, the Republicans, the far right, the conservatives, they always win because they will never let up. They will never stop pushing right words. We see that in modern day times. So I just can't take him seriously here.
Because he's not taking into account who the opposition is.
Exactly.
Well, he's not doing it realistically.
Why are progressives being rigid?
They're not.
Why are progressives being rigid? Like, if we're not going to compromise on things like tuition-free public colleges and universities, if we're not going to compromise on things like Medicare for all, why would we not compromise on that? Because we know that if we do, it will never get done.
What I wish he would have provided an example to bring his point home. You know what I'm saying? Like, give us an example of some sort of progressive policy, right? And then a compromise of that policy or for that policy that would still render that bill or that legislation substantive and groundbreaking. He didn't give an example. I don't think progressives have a problem with compromise just as a principle.
In general. Right.
I think, like, or winning small battles to get to an ultimate objective.
Okay.
I don't think progressives have a problem with that. I think progressives have a problem with what the compromise is contingent upon. And you kind of briefly mentioned that when you talked about the strings.
Yeah.
What are those strings? You see what I'm saying?
Corporate interest.
Corporate interest. So
usually the strings or special interest.
Okay, so basically you're saying what is responsible for a representative's restrictive approach to a policy. And it's not just, hey, I'm just trying to look at this with common sense.
That's
You recognize where the restriction comes from, and I think
Right.
that's what progressives have a problem with. Like the question is, why is the amount of movement we have on policy like tentative and dependent upon like the corporate ties of a representative and how much of those corporate ties they are willing or unwilling to relinquish?
If we had a state of affairs in the United States of America where corruption wasn't legal, where we had faith in our Congress members to act in good faith and to actually represent us, not corporate interests. If we had that situation in the United States of America, then yeah, compromise would not be a dirty word, because then they would just be coming together, both sides. They would be coming together to do what's best for the American people. Now, there's different ways of getting things done. There's different vantage points. Well, hey, I have this idea, I think is the best way. No, I have this idea, I think this is the best way forward. Okay, come together, see what you can agree on, what you can't agree on, come to some formation of some legislation, push it through. It benefits the American people. We all want that. We all want that type of situation, that type of reality in the United States of America. But like we were just saying, what's going on in the background is things that prevent Congress members from coming to the table honestly and trying to act on our behalf.
So what we mean by compromise is not the same thing that they mean by compromise.
Not at all.
One thing that did jump out at me is when he said we need to take into account people who disagree with us or disagree with you. I forgot what word he used, but basically take into account the position of the other side. And I think that introduces the fallacy of 2 points on either side of a spectrum are always equal. And that's not true, especially if you're talking about the other side. Like we can talk about an issue like abortion. They want to completely eradicate it. They want to completely eradicate it. Right. We just, like, progressives and leftists just want to make it available legally because we know that if we don't, then it's just going to be worse. Situations are going to be worse. There's no compromise. That is the compromise right there. Right. The regulation of a particular behavior. That is the compromise. I'll use another example. Nazi and anti-Nazi. What's the compromise between those two? Kinda Nazi? You see what I'm saying? Like fascist and anti-fascist. What's the compromise be that we can be kind of fascist? There's like all two opposing opinions are not always equal, and I think that's just a fallacy.
On marriage equality. Now we have a state of affairs now in the United States of America where we do have marriage equality, but we didn't have that for years and years and years. I mean, it was never there. So that was always the conservative position. That was the liberal position for many years as well. Don't get me wrong, but they moved on that issue. Now there was an effort to compromise on it, but it was always bad. Because when you compromise on that, you're still discriminating against people because of who they are. So that will always be bad. That could always be bad. It will only ever always be bad because you're trying to compromise on people just being people.
Oh, it's like discriminate against no one and discriminate against everyone.
Right.
We got to find some common ground here.
Exactly.
Let's find some common ground and figure out like which people we're going to discriminate against.
Right. We'll just kind of softly discriminate.
We'll softly discriminate against them.
That's not a position.